Okay. The Rolling Stones, Hamilton, Depeche Mode, Britney Spears. What do these four, beyond being sources of music, have in common? Every single one of them has a song which tells a story of someone unable to be satisfied, who can't get enough, who wants more. I can't get no satisfaction. And I try, and I try, and I try. I can't get no. He will never be satisfied. I will never be satisfied. I just can't get enough. I just can't get enough. I just can't seem to get enough. Give me more, give me more. Her lyrics aren't often, so. No, so not rainbows, but really, why are there so many songs about dissatisfaction? Because it's a really familiar feeling. And actually getting more common, getting worse for a lot of us. Ironically, in the parts of the world that, from the outside, should be least concerned about whether or not they have enough. My all-time favorite passages of Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers, relatively famous one. Ben Zoma said, Ezehu hacham halomed mikol adam, who is wise, the one who learns from every person. As it is said in Psalms, from all who taught me, I have gained understanding. Ezehu gibor hakovesh et yitzro, who is mighty, one who subdues their evil inclination. As it says in Proverbs, he that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that rules his spirit than he that takes a city. Ezehu ashir, hasameach bechelko, who is rich, the one who rejoices in their lot. As it is said also in Psalms, you shall enjoy the fruit of your labors, you shall be happy and you shall prosper. You shall be happy in this world, Ben Zoma says, and you shall prosper in the world to come. Ezehu mechubad hamekabed et habriot, who is honored, the one who honors their fellow human beings. As it is said in Samuel, for I honor those that honor me, but those who spurn me shall be dishonored. Each one of these could be its own sermon. Maybe someday I'll do a theme of Ben Zoma teaching for a sermon series. Each one of these can be its own sermon. But today I want to focus on the third one. Ezehu ashir, who is rich, hasameach bechelko, one who is happy with what they have. Anna Lemke is a practicing psychiatrist and the medical director of Stanford Addiction Medicine, and she researches the neuroscience of pleasure and satisfaction. She's the author of the book Dopamine Nation. As you might expect, given that she works at Stanford and her clients come from the Silicon Valley, one of the richest, one of the wealthiest counties in our country. We too, by the way, are amongst the wealthiest counties in the country. The average wealth of Dr. Lemke's clients is quite high. And yet, she says, she has seen depression at absolutely unprecedented rates and addictive behavior surrounding almost anything. Furthermore, the ongoing research shows that the highest rates of depression and addiction can occur in the wealthiest nations and the wealthiest areas of the nations. Friends, we too live in one of the wealthiest counties, in one of the wealthiest nations of the world, and yet, by Ben Zoma's standards, Dr. Lemke's research says that we have never been poorer because we have never been less happy. In today's world, we can get almost anything that we might want almost instantly. And yet it seems to never be enough for us. So how can we get rich in a world in which everything is not enough? In this sermon, I want to share some of my discoveries in reading and listening to some of Dr. Lemke's research about what gets in our way, and then share with you a few of her solutions, and then a few solutions and teachings that I think we have actually had all along, right here within our own tradition. So Dr. Lemke teaches that there's new research in neuroscience that shows that the experiences of pleasure and pain are co-located in our brains, which means they're processed in the same place. She says when we're thinking about experiences of pleasure or pain, we should also almost imagine a little teeter-totter or seesaw, whatever dialect you choose to use, in our brains, with pleasure to one side and pain to the other. And pain, by the way, not always physical pain, but emotional pain, discomfort. And when we engage in a high dopamine-inducing substance or behavior, whether that's an illegal or a legal substance or behavior, we press on the pleasure side of this fulcrum. Our brains, however, don't like this to be out of balance. It always wants to return to homeostasis, to stability. And so our brains, when we press on the pleasure side, presses back in equal measure to the pain side, and then given time, comes back to rest. This sort of system made sense when God first created us, and when it initially evolved in a world where we needed to work hard to achieve a dopamine hit. The episode in which Dr. Lemke was interviewed on the podcast Hidden Brain, Lemke invited us to imagine ourselves desiring a delicious, sweet date in a pre-technological world. If you want that date, you have to first track down a tree that is bearing fruit. Then you have to climb that tree and gather those dates. If that tree has fewer than you need for yourself or for your family, you have to keep walking, possibly for miles to find the next one, which means the entire time while you seek your pleasure of that date, you're also pressing on the pain and challenge side as you exert energy to get there. But in our modern world, if you want dates, you don't really have to go anywhere. Sure, you could hop into your car and drive to Wegmans to get a box of them. But you actually don't even need to exert that much effort. You can just order them from your phone, tap the little square in your pocket a few times, and someone will drop them off at your door. And they don't even have to be sweet dates anymore. They can be enhanced with fats and salts and flavors and sugars, and press that dopamine side even harder. And so we live in what Dr. Lemke referred to as a dopamine economy, one in which there is a near constant access to sources of feel-good neurotransmitter just about everywhere, and nearly, if not actually, instantaneously through the incredible processes of technology. Want a chocolate bar without leaving your house? DoorDash. Not sure if you feel like watching another episode on Netflix? Don't worry, Netflix says you do, and we'll just play it for you. Want to zone out on your phone for a little while? Want to zone out for a little while? Your smartphone is filled with apps that will help you do that, whether they be games or social media or even the news. Dr. Lemke puts it, the world now offers a full complement of digital drugs that did not exist before, or if they did exist, they now exist on digital platforms that have exponentially increased their potency and availability. Furthermore, the technology itself is addictive, with flashing lights, musical fanfare, bottomless bowls, and the promise with ongoing engagement of ever greater rewards. One of the problems that we face today is actually access. Our access to high dopamine reward behaviors and substances is practically unlimited. You might think that that should mean we're constantly happy. We can always get something that will give us pleasure. But remember, the pain side of that seesaw in our brain is there. And when we press pleasure, it's hard to say, press pleasure, our brains compensate by pressing pain. And if we press pleasure again to try to relieve that, the brain presses back too. And eventually our brain stops letting go of the pain side. Dr. Lemke says, picture neuro gremlins camping out on the pain side of your seesaw. And so we end up needing that drug, whether a literal or figurative one, just to feel normal. So we're trying now to push against an out of balance fulcrum. Yet in digesting this research, I found myself thinking about dopamine, which is an integral neurotransmitter, not only for a feeling of pleasure, but for our very motivation to go forward. It started to remind me of the rabbinic texts about the Yetzer Hara, our own evil inclinations, which is another of Ben Zoma's teachings. It's taught that when God formed the human beings were given two inclinations, one for good that leads us to prayer and to worship and to be kind, and one for bad, which is the selfish side often. In the Talmud, there's a story in which the sages pray and manage to imprison the Yetzer Hara so that everyone's Yetzer Hara is shut down for a period of 3 days. The Yetzer Hara, upon being imprisoned, warns that his imprisonment will be the world's undoing. And while the Yetzer Hara is imprisoned, there are no fresh eggs anywhere for 3 days because the chickens stopped laying them. They lost their innate drive to procreate. The chickens stopped laying the eggs. And in Midrash Breshit Rabbah, it said, without our Yetzer Hara, no one would ever build a home, marry, or potentially even eat. Dr. Lemke described a study in which rats had the receptors for dopamines had shut down. Essentially, they could not experience a dopamine hit. And those rats wouldn't eat food, even if it was placed directly in front of them. They would only eat it if it was placed into their mouths. Means we need this system. It is the system that drives motivation, that drives survival, that drives procreation, that drives our creativity and our ability to flourish. But in a world of constant access to it, it seems we need to reset our balance a bit. Because when we live in abundance, we paradoxically have to work to make things a little harder in order to be satisfied, to get ourselves to a state of hasamech bechelko, of happy with our lots. Some of Dr. Lemke's solutions are fairly straightforward. Perhaps abstain from whatever behavior or substance is of your choice is, at least for a long enough time to reset your own balance. She describes working with a patient and convincing her just 4 weeks. Try for just 4 weeks. And then when you do re-engage, set parameters around it. How much time will you allow yourself to engage? And for how long and when? Is it something that you can choose to only give yourself access to sometimes by not having it available all the time? Is it keep certain foods out of the house? Is it perhaps only open certain apps on your phones at certain times of day? This one works particularly well, leaving it out of your house. For junk food, have them sometimes, but don't keep stock at home. Dr. Lemke also says purposely pressing on the pain side by putting some amount of work into challenge into the process of getting to what you enjoy may also help overall happiness and satisfaction, and not necessarily only in the process of one or the other, just inserting some amount of physical exertion or challenge, or emotional exertion or challenge into your life. This might look like exercising if you'd rather sleep in. It might mean biking instead of driving. It might even mean coming to prayer services, whereby you bring yourself into a different state of mind and force yourself to think differently and in an engaged way. The key solution that Dr. Lemke shared, I brought up yesterday as well. Be in relationship with others. Many things that look similar to, or actually are, addiction are things that we practice in isolation. Things that we start to build walls of shame around and avoid others. When we allow ourselves to enjoy things with others, we also allow others to help keep us in check. We use them as tools, not only to build relationships, but we allow the thing that gives us pleasure to be a tool to increase intimacy. And then oxytocin joins the dopamine party. The pleasure is more sustained, and the bounce back is more is less extreme and takes more time and comes more calmly. If you want the full details and analysis of her solutions, I'm happy to send you links to the 2 episodes of her interview on Hidden Brain. But I also want to highlight a few suggestions that I think our own tradition offers us, that we can take into a year, it can give into our new year, and that we can use to make this perhaps the sweetest and most satisfying yet. Solutions that Judaism has given at our fingertips all along. One, I already mentioned, is indeed prayer. For when we engage in prayer, we acknowledge that we are only part of the world. With that mindset, perhaps we can recognize that our lives need not be all about the pursuit of our own pleasure, and that we need to pause in our day to express gratitude. Force ourselves to think a little bit on the side of what is it in the world that need not be about my pleasure, that slightly pushes to the other side. We also increase our access to community when we come to prayer. Another solution comes from the Rambam, also called Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, or Maimonides. Maimonides was both a rabbinic scholar and a medical doctor, and he wrote his own halachic code during the Middle Ages in Egypt. Within this Mishneh Torah, he has an entire section known as Hilchot Deot, often translated as the laws of human dispositions, and in which he lays out a guide for building our character traits to be good people and to be resilient people. If you're interested in exploring the section more broadly, please join my adult ed class in November. But relevant to today's sermon is one little piece of advice he has when it comes to eating, in which I would expand to consuming anything, whether physically consuming or partaking in behaviors. One should not eat until one's stomach is full, he says. Rather, one should stop when one has eaten to about 3/4 full. Think about what that would take for a second. To stop when you are 75% satisfied means that you have to slow down, to notice what you've had so far, to enjoy the pleasure you're already experiencing. Means that you get to enjoy as you're consuming and not letting yourself get into a trance, which can be indicative of addictive behavior. It resets consciousness and encourages conscious enjoyment and therefore conscious happiness. And I think our Torah actually already suggested that, perhaps subtly. The line from Devarim, from Deuteronomy, that we quote in the Birkat Hamazon, the blessing after a meal, in which we see the words, ve'achalta, ve'savata, uverachta. You will eat, again, eating broadly here, you will be satisfied, and you will bless. As we enjoy the pleasures of this beautiful creation that God has given us, and which we have expanded to incredible abundance as a species, we must have satisfaction and blessing. We have to do that. Really gratitude in mind. Our rabbis even instituted a short blessing before we consume as a reminder to be grateful for what we are about to enjoy. Someone who can think about, if you don't already have a practice, invite you to think about including a practice of a blessing before. It might actually help you do Rambam's suggestion, because you'll be reminding yourself to come in before. Thinking of these words, ve'achalta, ve'savata, u'berachta. In my years at Camp Ramah, I have had several campers over the years try to say that they should not actually have to say Birkat Hamazon by saying something along the lines of, well, if it's eat, be satisfied, and bless, I shouldn't have to bless if I wasn't satisfied. That dinner was gross. So then I say, I think we've misunderstood Vesavata. You will be satisfied. I think it's fair because English suggests that be satisfied is a passive experience, something that happens to us. The stone said, I can't get no satisfaction, as though it is something given that we get. But visavata, as a Hebrew verb, is in the same active conjugation of ve'achalta and uverachta. You should eat and you shall bless. So it's not really you shall receive satisfaction or you shall get satisfaction. It is you shall decide to be satisfied. In a world of constant dopamine-inducing choices, Vesavata has become, I think, for us, a challenge. It is a call to choose enough and gratitude instead of more. It's a reminder to stop and be grateful for what we have, even as we have the moment of the neutral letdown, while our brain overcompensates before returning to homeostasis. It's the ability to pause and say, I am satisfied with this pleasure hit, and I will be patient through the pushback of my brain. Our Torah's wisdom has helped us through millennia of challenges. Today, one of the biggest challenges we may face is that the world has actually become too easy and too bountiful for some of us. We may let ourselves in the year ahead attempt to heal from them. May we stop mindlessly pushing down too often on the pleasure side of our own balances, such that we no longer really perceive it. May we find ourselves ways to enjoy modestly and moderately, and therefore more deeply. May we challenge ourselves to be satisfied. May we be happy with our amazing, abundant, bountiful, wealthy lot. And then may we bless. Shana Tova.